President Obama's relationship or lack of relationship with Congress has been the subject of debate over the years on Capitol Hill. But it's not every day a fellow Democrat criticizes the president's frosty relations.
It's hard to say no to a friend. When you build that relationship and that friendship, you're looking for ways to try to work things out and find a compromise, and you know, that friendship means an awful lot. When you don't build those personal relationships, it's pretty easy for a person to say, well, let me think about it.
Joining us now, Angela Rye, a political strategist and principal of Impact Strategies. We also have Chris Wilson, a Republican pollster. Good day to both of you. And Angela, we'll start with you here. How prevalent is this idea that Manchin is bringing up with congressional Democrats?
Well, we do know, as you said, that this has been a point of discussion for years. And what we also know is that when the president initially came into office, right after the 2008 election, the president's focus was on trying to fix some of the dysfunction in Washington. And that meant kind of disengaging from that and really trying to focus on policy. And over time, we've seen him make several changes, whether it was appointing Chief of Staff Daley to be kind of the relator-in-chief and delegating some more of that to the vice president. He's done even more after he appointed Chief of Staff McDonough to do some more of the relationships. He started doing more golf outings and dinners. What we've seen on the other side, though, and Senator Manchin can attest to this, relationships isn't necessarily the end-all, be-all. He has relationships now from being in Senate for just a little while, and his Manchin-Toomey amendment didn't succeed, not because of the relationships, but because of the power of the NRA lobby. So it's not just relationships, it's definitely a mixture of both.
Chris, what do you think here? Is this more of what she was just mentioning, Angela, a second ago there, about them wanting more attention? Perhaps some lawmaker just saying, hey, we just want to get more attention here, and they're instead pointing the finger at President Obama.
Well, I think to Angela's point, Obama did enter office with sort of this promise of a new type of politics, and what we've seen is exactly the opposite. At least in the past, with Clinton or with Bush or with Reagan or Bush or Carter, you saw them at least have a solid relationship with their own party. And what Manchin, who Manchin should be pointed out is a Democrat senator from West Virginia who isn't up for re-election next cycle. He's pointing out that they don't even have a good relationship, or Obama doesn't even have a good relationship with his own party. And so what that brings about is probably the earliest lame duck presidency in American history, because he doesn't have that relationship. In fact, last week, he didn't even trust his own party to fix the hardship exemption. Instead, he pushed it through executive fiat. And I think when you see that a president doesn't even have the type of relationship with his party to be able to govern, then it really brings about the sort of breakdown that we've never seen before between the president and the Senate.
Well, in Republican leadership, though, and you see this, both of you, Angela and Chris, when you see Republican leadership in the House that is also not working with the president, one might say, well, hey, it's the Speaker's problem here.
Well, I think you're right. You don't as often see a president work with the members of the other party. That becomes a difficult factor, as it was with Bush and the Democrat senates or senators, or Clinton and the Republican senators. I mean, you kind of expect that, although you hoped Obama was going to be able to fix it. But this isn't a case of Obama not being able to work with Republicans. It's a case of Obama not being able to work with Democrats. And as we move closer to the 2014 elections, and Democrats really risking losing the Senate, whenever you've got races in Arkansas and Louisiana where you've actually got Democrat members of the Senate in North Carolina who are sort of disavowing the president and his policies, I think that makes for the most dysfunctional Senate and Congress we've seen, again, in American history.
Angela?
So what I was getting ready to say is that we saw Speaker Boehner have a meltdown about these very politics. I disagree. This is not about the president's inability to work with Democrats. We've, again, seen him do that in several different ways, try to meet them where they are. And most recently, he appointed a new head of Leg Affairs who they're comfortable with. She was a Schumer staffer. So, again, we're going to see this evolution happen again, trying to meet in the middle of the Washington dysfunction. And part of that is about meeting folks where they are. Again, he's working with both sides of the aisle. Hopefully they'll work back.
I want to read something that David Hawkins had written about this situation earlier in the month. He says, quote, inviting clusters of lawmakers over to watch a movie or to jawbone on the Truman balcony, as his predecessors did, is not Obama's style. Something of a surprise, given that he was the first sitting member of Congress elected president since John F. Kennedy. Instead, he's steered almost entirely clear of socializing with his one-time colleagues this year, beyond the obligatory state dinner invitation and that handful of meals earlier in the year with clusters of senators, end quote. So, Chris, if the president did do these things, would Republicans then be more willing to work with him?
Well, I don't know is the answer. I mean, it's difficult to say. I think they'd be more willing than they are now. But again, I'd point out the problem really isn't with Obama and Republicans. It's with Obama and Democrats. It's when you take his signature piece of legislation, Obamacare,
but to that question, though, do you believe if he did do those things as suggested, that was written by David Hawkins, would Republican leaders be more willing to engage with the president?
Well, if you're asking if he had a personal relationship with Republican members of the Senate, I think the answer is yes. In the same way, you saw Ronald Reagan go out and build very strong relations with the Tip O'Neills of the world, the Democratic Speaker of the House, and so they were able to push legislation through and work together. And because that sort of environment doesn't exist, because you don't see Obama trying to socialize with Republicans or Democrats for that matter, because he sort of has built this insular relationship to where he's only got his staff that he works with and doesn't really reach out to members of either party, you really have a presidency that has such a bad relationship with both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate and the House, that it makes it impossible for him to do anything outside of executive order or fiat.
Angela, respond to that, and also give us some ideas. You talked about the president, so you alluded to it, his charm offensive that he had brought on earlier in the year. What can he do to turn this situation around if it were up to him?
I think we're all human beings and we continue to evolve, right? So part of this is when there's a complaint, he can answer it. There's a new head of legislative affairs, as we just discussed. One thing that members of Congress do often, whether it's for fundraisers or to talk to some of the other folks on the other side of the aisle, it's call time. So he can also start making some additional phone calls. But again, we should definitely give his new legislative affairs chief the time to see how these relationships pan out with her being there. It's been 10 days, so let's just give her a chance.
All right, so and then they also have a bipartisan budget deal that made it through. We're reaching the new year, 2014. The president, in his year-end speech and his briefing, he sounded a little bit upbeat about what might happen, what he might be able to get done with Congress next year. You think that's going to be the case? And I want to get both your reactions. Chris, you first, quickly.
Sure. Well, I think the problem is just the way he's going about fixing Obamacare is actually burning more bridges than it's helping, because he is pushing things through rather than the right way to do that would probably be to give it to some of those Democrat members in the Senate who are up for re-election, have tough re-election Republican southern states. But he's not doing that. He's pushing it through executive order and giving his own party little credit for fixing the problems that have been created and that are probably going to cost him 3 to 5 seats. I'm really not.
Okay, Angela, quickly.
Sure. I think, that, again, with the budget deal, it was more of a Republican-leaning budget. He met the Republicans where they were a whole lot more than the Democrats. But I do think it is a step in the right direction. It sounds like Speaker Boehner might be willing to continue to push things, and we just have to see. Let's see what happens in 2014.
All right. Thank you both, Angela Rye and Chris Wilson. Have a very good Monday.
Thank you.
That wraps up this hour of Jansing & Company. I'm Richard Louie in for Chris Jansing. Craig Melvin is up next for Thomas Roberts. Stick around.